I know I've been in situations like that before. It's never played out publicly like this was, but I can understand where she's coming from a little bit.
Damn, so you've been in that situation before, yet you still felt the need to throw her in front.
That right, there was a stunning moment. A WNBA legend, Cheryl Miller, openly admitted that she had experienced the exact same situation that Caitlin Clark is facing today. But instead of using that perspective to defend Clark, many fans felt she did the opposite, appearing to criticize her and fueling even more controversy. Her comments on Sunday immediately sparked a firestorm across social media, exposing what many believe is a growing divide in how the league and its media figures cover Clark. The reaction was swift and intense, leaving fans asking one question. What exactly did Cheryl Miller say that created such a massive backlash?
Listen.
Happens more often than not. I agree with her on that.
Oh yeah, she definitely has a microscope on her. Honestly, I think it's just more of the same what we talked about yesterday. Yeah. Which was, for me, coach-player relationship matters. What is allowed, I guess, between that relationship. But it comes to a point where I think an area of growth for Caitlin.
This is where the situation becomes more complicated. Sue Bird's comments focus on a reasonable and widely accepted point: emotional growth. She discussed how championship-level players learn to manage frustration when calls do not go their way, and how maintaining composure is part of becoming an elite competitor. Most fans viewed that as fair analysis and had no issue with her perspective. The controversy began when the discussion moved beyond that coachable moment and into a broader narrative that many listeners felt sounded less like independent commentary and more like a coordinated message. At that point, Cheryl Miller became the central voice in the conversation, and her remarks quickly shifted the focus, sparking debate and raising questions about the motives behind the league's public messaging surrounding Caitlin Clark.
I've got to say one thing about Caitlin, and I sometimes I have to remember that she is young, Sue, and the amount of pressure that is on this young lady, and she's coming back, from her injuries and living up to what everybody expects her to be and do and whatnot can be a little bit overwhelming. So I'm gonna give her some grace, and she's right.
Listen to that carefully. Cheryl Miller begins by saying that she wants to give Caitlin Clark grace. She acknowledges the immense pressure facing a young star who is returning from a groin injury that sidelined her for a significant portion of the season, while also carrying the weight of extraordinary expectations. Miller even notes that she has personally experienced similar situations during her own career, suggesting a level of understanding and empathy. However, moments later, she shifts from sympathy to criticism, and that abrupt turn is what has frustrated many fans. To them, it follows a familiar pattern: praise first, criticism second. Support is offered in one breath, only to be followed by comments that seem to undermine it in the next. For many observers, the controversy is not just about the single interview, but about what they see as a recurring trend in the conversation surrounding Caitlin Clark.
Lisa Leslie, Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark should be co-MVP. Then the next day, Lisa Leslie says, Caitlin and being left off Team USA and this, that, and the third. No. We already know where you stand on things. We already know where you're.
Many fans point to previous examples when discussing this pattern. They often reference comments from Lisa Leslie, who publicly praised Caitlin Clark and even suggested she belonged in the MVP conversation. However, critics argue that the tone changed when discussions shifted to Clark's exclusion from Team USA, with some remarks appearing to justify the decision rather than challenge it. To those fans, the sequence felt familiar: strong public praise followed by comments that seemed to soften or reverse that support when controversy emerged. This perception has fueled a broader accusation that some basketball legends offer complimentary remarks about Clark when circumstances are favorable, but reveal their true loyalties when she faces adversity. Whether that interpretation is fair or not, it reflects a growing belief among Clark supporters that the real test of support comes during difficult moments, not when everything is going well.
Heard. Moving on.
It's not that Caitlin, it's not about diminishing what makes Caitlin great. And to your point, it's that competitiveness. It's everything she does offensively, right? She has to cut her runway. She has to acknowledge where her runway ends and understand where she's becoming bigger than the program and how that's impacting.
Okay. She has to acknowledge where her runway ends, but then you're asking her to cut her runway.
this is the part of the debate that many fans find most troubling. The argument being raised is that Caitlin Clark needs to cut her runway and recognize where her limits begin, but critics of that viewpoint question what such a request really means. Clark's fearless style of play, her deep shooting range, aggressive decision-making, and willingness to attempt shots few players would even consider is a major part of what makes her such a unique offensive force. Those qualities have not only defined her success, but have also helped attract millions of new viewers to the WNBA. As a result, some fans see a contradiction when media voices suggest that she should scale back the very traits that made her a star. In their view, it is difficult to celebrate Clark's impact, creativity, and offensive brilliance while simultaneously arguing that she should become less aggressive. They believe the qualities being criticized are the same qualities that transformed her into one of the most talked about players in basketball.
There's two, Andy Constable. We all know Andy Constable by now. Raven Johnson should start. Oh, God.
I don't know if it's going to be Caitlin doing it for Caitlin. I think an external event has to happen. Raven Johnson starts. Right?
Oh my God. Can you imagine? Like,
I can't, literally cannot.
Can you imagine? Dude, imagine. imagine a WNBA show. And we're saying
another flashpoint in the debate centers on discussions about Raven Johnson potentially being inserted into the starting lineup. Critics argue that the enthusiasm surrounding that suggestion revealed more than just a basketball opinion. In their view, the conversation did not feel like a neutral analysis of lineup combinations or team strategy. Instead, they believe it reflected a broader desire to reduce Caitlin Clark's role. However, when the practical realities of the lineup were examined, it became clear that Johnson joining the starting five would most likely come at the expense of Lexi Hull rather than Clark. That detail led some fans to question the true purpose of the discussion. From their perspective, the debate was never really about finding the best role for Raven Johnson. It was about creating a pathway to criticize or potentially sideline Clark. Whether that interpretation is accurate or not, it has become another example cited by supporters who feel that conversations about Clark are often driven by motivations beyond pure basketball analysis.
Event has to happen.
Look how excited and giddy she's getting ready to float this bullshit out here.
I don't know if it's going to be Caitlin doing it.
She can't hide her excitement.
I think an external event has to happen.
She can't hide her excitement.
Raven Johnson
right
starts. Right?
Oh my God. Can you imagine? Like,
I can't, literally cannot.
I literally cannot imagine Caitlin getting cut.
Raven Johnson is only entering the starting lineup if it comes at the expense of Lexi Hull. Like, that's the only way this is happening.
There you go, Sabrina. Shout out to you.
I feel you. I'm just giving you an example of like a canon type event that would need to occur for Caitlin
For many of Clark's supporters, this is a thread that ties the entire debate together. They point to suggestions that some sort of external event is needed to force Caitlin Clark to become more humble if she does not do so on her own. The discussion goes even further with the idea of a so-called canon event, a moment when Clark is expected to publicly acknowledge that she is not the main attraction, but simply one member of a team. Critics of that narrative find the expectation unusual, arguing that few, if any, highly celebrated rookies in the past were subjected to the same demand. Star players have often entered professional leagues carrying enormous hype and serving as the centerpiece of their franchises, yet they were rarely told to diminish their public profile before earning acceptance. As a result, many fans reject the notion that this is merely a lesson in humility. Instead, they view it as pressure for Clark to downplay her impact, believing the message is not simply to be a team player, but to make herself smaller so that others are more comfortable with her prominence.
Playing that had to be, situated, I feel like, that when something that big or someone that big who has that much impact comes into something, there are a lot of adjustments that people have to make on the floor, off the floor, in the locker room, in the training room. Just a lot of stuff is a lot of moving parts. And I think the biggest part that I respected about Caitlin is that she never was bigger than the program.
Hold on. I didn't hear you.
In the training room. Just a lot of stuff is a lot of moving parts. And I think the biggest part that I respected about Caitlin is that she never was...
For many fans, this is the point where the narrative begins to break down. While some media voices spent days arguing that Caitlin Clark views herself as bigger than the team or the organization, comments from those who actually share the locker room with her paint a very different picture. Kelsey Mitchell, for example, has spoken about the challenges that come with integrating a player of Clark's stature into a franchise. She acknowledged the adjustments required both on and off the court, from changes in team dynamics to the increased attention surrounding every aspect of the organization. Yet what What stood out most in Mitchell's remarks was her praise for Clark's approach as a teammate, rather than describing someone who acted above the team. Mitchell emphasized that Clark embraced the collective environment and never carried herself as if she were bigger than the program. To Clark supporters, that creates a striking contrast. Teammates with first-hand experience describe a player committed to the team, while some outside commentators continue to promote a narrative that suggests otherwise.
Gerd saying, the one thing I like about Caitlin Clark, she's never acted like she's bigger than the program. She never gave me the impression that she's bigger than the program. She was always ready to just fit right in, do what was needed to be done. Then we have another stooge, part of the Three Stooges. We have another one that says, oh, Caitlin Clark, she needs to be punished. She needs to be put in timeout. There needs to be something done about.
And Kelsey Mitchell is not the only teammate who has spoken positively about Caitlin Clark's approach. Mitchell has repeatedly said that one of the things she respects most about Clark is that she never acted as if she were bigger than the team. Despite arriving with unprecedented attention and expectations, Clark was willing to fit in, do the work, and contribute wherever needed. That creates a striking contradiction. The people inside the organization, teammates whose success depends on accurately understanding one another, describe a player who embraces her role and prioritizes the team. Yet many analysts and media personalities continue to push the opposite narrative, portraying Clark as someone who needs to be humbled or reminded of her place. One group interacts with her every day and has a direct stake in the team's success. The other is commenting from the outside for a public audience. Supporters argue that this goes beyond a single news cycle or a few controversial comments. They see a recurring pattern. A basketball legend or media figure makes a critical remark about Clark. Backlash follows. The comments are softened or clarified, and then the cycle repeats the next time Clark struggles. Critics point to examples involving Lisa Leslie, Cheryl Miller, and other prominent voices as evidence of this trend. They also highlight what they view as inconsistencies in the arguments themselves, from suggestions that Clark should scale back the aggressive style that made her a superstar to line up proposals that seemed to fall apart once the actual roster math was examined. What frustrates many fans even more is the double standard they perceive in the conversation. Independent creators and YouTube commentators are often dismissed as biased or lacking credibility because they are not part of the traditional media establishment. Yet some of the same credentialed analysts are making highly controversial claims of their own, including suggestions that a generational talent should be benched, limited, or taught a lesson if credentials are supposed to represent higher standards and accountability. Supporters argue that those standards should apply equally to everyone. Ultimately, the debate comes down to whose perspective people trust more. On one side are analysts and commentators offering opinions from a distance. On the other are teammates like Kelsey Mitchell, who have consistently described Clark as a player who fits into the team environment and never acts as if she is bigger than the program. When those closest to the situation tell a different story from those discussing it publicly, fans naturally begin asking who benefits from each narrative. That question continues to fuel one of the most divisive discussions surrounding Caitlin Clark and the WNBA today.